Why did Iran open fire on ships that aren't American? On the morning of April 18, 2026, Iranian naval forces fired on two Indian merchant vessels transporting Iraqi oil through the Strait of Hormuz. The targets weren't U.S. Navy destroyers. They were civilian cargo ships from a neutral country. Iran wasn't shooting at its enemy. It was sending a message to the entire world. But this brings up another question. How does firing on neutral ships help Iran in its standoff with the United States? This is the Strait of Hormuz. It's a 21-mile-wide choke point between Iran and Oman. It handles roughly 20% of the world's daily oil supply. Every single day, tankers carrying millions of barrels pass within miles of Iranian territory. For weeks, the U.S. has maintained a naval blockade on Iranian ports in response to Tehran's closure of the strait. Now, Iran has escalated by attacking ships that have nothing to do with the conflict. Let's map out what happened. This is Stage 1, the closure announcement. On April 17th, Iran's Naval Command sent a radio broadcast to all merchant vessels in the region. The Strait of Hormuz is closed. No vessel is authorized to pass. This wasn't the first time Iran had threatened closure, but this time, they meant it. The broadcast went out on VHF Channel 16, the International Maritime Distress Frequency. Every ship captain in the region heard it. But why target Indian ships instead of American ones? That's Stage 2. The Indian tankers proceed anyway. Two merchant ships under Indian flag entered the strait at dawn on April 18th. One of them was a VLCC supertanker carrying 2 million barrels of Iraqi crude oil, valued at roughly $140 million. The crews likely assumed the closure applied only to U.S.-flagged vessels. India isn't part of the U.S.-Iran conflict, but Iran saw it differently. Stage 3. Iranian forces open fire. Instead of warning shots, Iranian patrol boats fire directly at the merchant ships. No injuries are reported, but the message is clear. This isn't a selective blockade against American ships. It's total closure. The Iranian boats approached from multiple angles, firing machine guns at the waterline. One round struck the VLCC's bridge window. The tanker radioed for assistance, but there were no U.S. Navy destroyers nearby to respond. But what happens when the world's third-largest oil importer can't guarantee safe passage for its tankers? Stage 4. The global oil market reacts. Within hours, Brent crude prices spike by 8%. Shipping companies reroute tankers around Africa, adding 3 to 4 weeks to delivery times and millions in fuel costs. Lloyd's of London immediately raises insurance premiums for any vessel transiting the Persian Gulf. The economic impact is instant. Stage 5. India, a neutral party, is forced to choose sides. New Delhi now faces a decision: protest diplomatically and risk alienating Iran, or stay silent and accept that its merchant fleet is vulnerable. India's Ministry of External Affairs released a statement condemning the attack, but stopped short of calling it an act of war. The two ships were eventually allowed to pass after a 6-hour standoff, but only after offloading their Iraqi oil at a holding facility in Oman. But how did Iranian forces justify firing on a neutral country's ships? Iran's position is simple. If the strait is closed, it's closed to everyone. The U.S. blockade on Iranian ports prevents oil exports, so Iran prevents oil imports for everyone else. It's economic warfare. Vice President Mohammad Reza Aref stated publicly that Iran is in full control of the Strait of Hormuz and will insist on its interests. The attack on Indian ships proves that threat is real. Let's take a look at what Iran was actually firing on. The VLCC is a tanker designed to carry 2 million barrels of crude oil. That's roughly 84 million gallons. It has a length of approximately 100 feet, which translates to around 335 meters. The beam width is 200 feet. The draft when fully loaded is 70 feet. The ship's bridge sits at the stern, giving the crew a view over 16 cargo tanks separated by bulkheads. The tanker is essentially a floating city block full of flammable liquid. Here's how it works. Step 1. Oil is pumped into segregated tanks via loading arms at port. Step 2. Inert gas systems prevent explosive vapor buildup during transit. Step 3. The crew monitors tank pressure, ballast water, and navigation through the strait's narrow shipping lanes. Step 4. At the destination port, pumps reverse the flow to offload cargo. The entire vessel is crewed by about 25 to 30 sailors. It's a civilian merchant ship with no defensive weapons. But how does Iran enforce a blockade without a blue water navy? Speaking of data flowing across borders, your personal information is being traded right now by data brokers, just like oil is traded on global markets. Incogni helps you take back control. Data brokers collect and sell your personal details to advertisers, scammers, and even foreign governments. Incogni contacts these brokers on your behalf and forces them to remove your data from their databases. It's automated, it's secure, and it works. You get regular reports showing exactly which brokers had your data and which ones have deleted it. Right now, you can get an exclusive discount by using the link in the description. But while Incogni protects your data from brokers, there's no service that can protect merchant ships from Iranian patrol boats. So what exactly does Iran have in the water? Iran's asymmetric naval strategy is how a regional power controls a global choke point without aircraft carriers or destroyers. The Indian tanker attack demonstrates Iran's doctrine of swarm tactics, using fast, cheap vessels to threaten high-value targets. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, known as the IRGCN, operates roughly 1,500 fast attack craft. These are small boats armed with machine guns, RPGs, and anti-ship missiles like the C-704. These boats cost $50,000 to $200,000 each. A VLCC tanker costs $120 million. But how do these $50,000 speedboats threaten $120 million tankers? Let's take a look at how this works. Step 1. Multiple fast boats approach from different angles, overwhelming defensive systems. Step 2. Boats fire machine guns or RPGs at the waterline or bridge to disable steering. Step 3. Larger boats launch anti-ship missiles at close range. The tanker can't outrun them. Top speed is 16 knots. The patrol boats can reach 50 knots. They close the distance in minutes. But what leverage does Iran actually have in the Strait of Hormuz? The geography alone is Iran's biggest weapon. The strait is only 21 miles wide at its narrowest point. The shipping lanes are even tighter. Tankers have to pass within 12 miles of the Iranian coast, which is Iranian territorial waters under international law. Iran has installed anti-ship missile batteries along the coastline. The Noor missile has a range of 120 kilometers. That covers the entire width of the strait. Any merchant vessel transiting the choke point is within range. But what happens if the U.S. Navy escorts merchant vessels through the strait? That's the escalation risk. If U.S. Navy destroyers escort merchant ships through the strait, they face a dilemma. Do they fire on Iranian boats preemptively, risking a wider war? Or do they wait until shots are fired, giving Iran the first mover advantage? The rules of engagement for neutral ships in a conflict zone are unclear. If an Indian tanker requests U.S. protection and Iranian boats attack, the U.S. destroyer has seconds to decide whether to engage. But can the U.S. Navy realistically escort every merchant ship through the strait? The math doesn't work. Roughly 30 to 40 tankers pass through the Strait of Hormuz every day. The U.S. Navy has about 70 destroyers and cruisers worldwide. Even if half were assigned to the Persian Gulf, that's 35 warships trying to protect 40 tankers per day. with each transit taking 6 to 8 hours. The U.S. can protect high-priority vessels, but not the entire flow of global oil commerce. But can Iran sustain this blockade without destroying its own economy? That's the paradox. Iran's own oil exports also depend on the strait. Before the U.S. blockade, Iran exported roughly 1.5 million barrels per day through Hormuz. Now, that's cut to zero. But Iran's calculus is simple. If we can't export oil, no one can. It's a scorched earth strategy. The Iranian government is betting that the global economic pain will force the U.S. to negotiate. But what are the rules of engagement for neutral ships in a conflict zone? International maritime law is murky here. The Strait of Hormuz is an international waterway under the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. Iran has the right to regulate passage through its territorial waters, but it doesn't have the right to close an international strait entirely. Firing on civilian merchant vessels is considered a hostile act. But if Iran declares the strait a war zone, neutral ships enter at their own risk. But how did the U.S. respond to Iran attacking a third-party country? The Pentagon issued a statement condemning the attack and reaffirming freedom of navigation. But there was no immediate military response. The U.S. is in a difficult position. Escalating to protect Indian ships could draw the U.S. into a shooting war with Iran over a conflict that doesn't directly involve American vessels. The White House is reportedly pressuring India to file a formal complaint with the UN Security Council, but New Delhi has been non-committal. The two Indian ships eventually passed through the strait, but the precedent is set. Iran has demonstrated it will fire on any vessel that defies the closure order, regardless of flag or cargo. Global shipping companies are now rerouting tankers around the Cape of Good Hope in Africa. That adds 3,500 miles and roughly 15 days to the journey from the Persian Gulf to Europe. Fuel costs alone increase by $500,000 per voyage. Insurance premiums have tripled. The cost of oil is rising worldwide, not because of scarcity, but because of the risk premium of moving it. Iran made its point. The Strait of Hormuz is closed, even to countries that aren't part of the conflict. The attack on neutral ships is a calculated move. It internationalizes the crisis and forces other nations to take sides. India now has to decide whether to align with the U.S. position or seek a diplomatic resolution with Iran. Either way, the global oil supply is in jeopardy, and the economic fallout is just beginning. We make original videos from scratch and animated by humans. So, please subscribe to not miss a beat.